Welcome to Soul Rising. We're your hosts, Amy and Erin. We're two everyday mediums who are passionate about taking the woo-woo out of spirituality and bringing it down to earth. So put the kettle on, grab a chair, and join us. Hey everyone, Amy here. This is episode 22, where we're going to be talking about healing the witch wound. I just wanted to put out there a little bit of a warning, as we will be talking about healing intergenerational trauma. So just a fair warning in case this is a sensitive topic for you. Happy listening. So yeah, this is episode 22, which is my favorite number. So 22 is my favorite number. And we're talking about something that is really close to my heart and something that's kind of been showing up in my world lately. And that is healing the witch wound. And it's funny because we talked a little bit in the previous episode, in episode 21, about, we kind of touched on it a little bit when we were like, we're witches before, right? We talked a little bit about that already. So we're going to quote some sources that we found online. So we'll make sure that we tell you where we got the information from in case you want to read up on it as well. I don't know, did you want to start by maybe giving a description of what the witch wound is, or what your interpretation of it is?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, my understanding so far, and I'm definitely by no means an expert on this, it's actually something that I've just heard of. So maybe you're like me, listening, watching this, and you've also just heard of this. But my understanding is that the witch wound talks about ancestral, intergenerational trauma, but it also can talk about possibly, past life trauma and being persecuted or othered for being maybe, either a witch, literally, or you were othered in society. And I think because a lot of when we talk back on the witch trials, it wasn't necessarily that they were witches, right? But there was mass hysteria that if you were in any way seen as an other, right? Or if people feared you, you were automatically categorized as a witch.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
As labeled as this. And in saying that, I would say that part of the witch wound, I think there's different types. So there's mother witch wound, mother wound, sister wound, and the witch wound. They're all very unique, but there's that similarity there of healing that intergenerational trauma. And a lot of this, like, fear of the other or fear of people that are different, and I think we know this just in society, it's all fear-based.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit, I know that's very broad, but that's sort of just my overall understanding of it. I'm not sure if that fits, Amy, with what your understanding is.
Yes, it is. It's very much what I think as well. And I just want to also put out there that I don't think that when we talk about the witch wound, it doesn't just necessarily have to do with females. I really feel like it has to do with just the divine feminine in general, right? Yes. So there's certainly, this would, a male, somebody that would identify as a male would also likely feel this or understand this, because this is a collective wound. So it's all of us, like, globally. Does that make sense for you? Like within
100%.
Within our DNA.
I think this just goes to like we talked about this, the fear of the other.
So
not understanding.
It's a bit like the shadow, the shadow of our society. Because although these things happened, a few hundred years ago, like the actual burning of witches, it still shows up in our life in different ways still to this day. So we're going to talk a little bit about examples of how that may show up in our life today. So maybe that's where we'll go right now. I do want to source the article that I'm taking this information from. It's on medium.com. And that's not necessarily just to say, like, for mediums, it's just
It's the website,
It's just a
the
website where
platform.
people
Yeah.
can publish articles on different things. And so this article is called The Trinity Wounds, the Witch Wound, what it is, why it's so prevalent, and what we can do about it. And it is written by a person called Jade Eby. I want to say EBY. So I'm going to shout out to Jade. Thank you very much for this, this article. It's also really cool because she gives a lot of like she paints a picture really, not an actual picture, but she paints a story here. She gives a story kind of like to put yourself in that perspective. Like imagine this, imagine you are, you know, just doing your own thing, teaching yoga one morning or pulling some cards, and then blah, blah, you knock on the door, right? And then she kind of plays through like what would happen, you know, what happened to these women that were, you know, called witches back then, and just, you know, for doing something witchery, which, you know, today might be pulling a card or giving somebody advice, or I don't know,
being
like
a medium.
Absolutely, that would be one. It could even be like making up your own kind of ointment or something, you know, maybe it's like taking aloe out of the plant and creating some sort of medicine with it. Things like this were even thought of as witchery, right? Which is now just, you know, it's kind of sad though, because you think about, that's such a cultural thing. Like that's what our ancestors would have used for medicines. And that kind of it comes up here a little bit when we talk about how the witch wound may show up. So is it okay if I read that through?
Oh, of course. I'm just following along as well.
Okay, perfect. So in this article, she writes how the witch wound shows up. It could be being labeled as separate, other, or bad. So we certainly all can see how that is still playing out in society. Disconnection from your own cultural lineage, your own ancestry, perhaps. Disconnection from the healing modalities used by your ancestors. So that's what we were just talking about, right? Like maybe, like for me, for instance, I have some indigenous ancestry. So you can think about the healing modalities that would have been used there still are being used. But again, there's such a disconnection with the cultural lineage as well, which we see today, you know, and with the intergenerational trauma there. Feeling disembodied from yourself. So just kind of feeling disconnected to your body, mind, and soul, I feel. It's almost like a mistrust in yourself a little bit. Which I can see so much in my own life. But, you know, when we talk about like what we do and teaching others how to, you know, really trust in their intuition, we really are tapping into this witch wound, because the reason that people don't necessarily trust in it, one of the reasons may be because they are, you know, it hasn't been nurtured, or there's a lot of misinformation out there, or somebody kind of deterred them from it. So that would be an example as well. Oppression of your personal beliefs. So keeping things inside, oppression of your emotions, not feeling comfortable sharing things with people, a deep fear of speaking out and being seen. This is something that still plays out in my life almost daily. I have to force myself to use my voice and be seen, which might surprise people, but honestly, and then afterwards I go through the whole like, well, like, is anybody going to get that? Or did I say too much? Or was I weird? I go through that every day. So if you feel the same way, just know it's everybody.
It's normal. It's
normal. Disconnection from your inherent intuitive gifts and abilities. So Erin and I believe that everybody's intuitive. We all have an intuition. So it would be like a disconnection from that. Like, oh no, that's just, you know, the otherness can be putting, you know, maybe a medium in a box and saying, no, that's just for somebody like you. I could never do that. Isolation from others and from support of others. A mistrust of other women or men who are maybe not in your inner circle, or not somebody that you know really personally. So it's a very like me versus them mentality.
Us and them.
A constant fear of violence being used against you. And I see this, you know, a lot, and I'm thinking back to, you know, I don't so much like walk alone at night anymore, but I'm thinking back, you know, even like 15 years ago when I was a university student, always looking over my shoulder, you know, like very fearful of that, because of our society as well. I feel like it's just a disconnection from the divine feminine and all
that nurturing.
Like what the divine feminine is. And, you know, there's a lot of, like, that's like just this inherent thing within, like, I think women are really wise. I think women are wisdom keepers. And
Absolutely. I mean,
that's
you
like
look back in
traditionally.
society, even in I remember reading up on in indigenous circles that would be the women that led,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And the yeah.
I just
So
read something like that the other day because I'm reading this book by so she's a fellow Canadian. Um and have you ever heard of Asha Frost?
no.
Okay, she's on Instagram, so you should give her a follow. She just wrote a book
I'm gonna give her a
um
follow now.
called You Are the Medicine.
Ah,
And it's amazing. So there's like 13, I think there's 13 chapters, and each chapter is about um well, it's really based on the 13 lunar cycles.
mm,
And she really provides a lot. It talks a lot about intergenerational trauma from
trauma.
that perspective, from like
Yeah.
the indigenous
Indigenous
perspective, and
absolutely.
really
Absolutely.
shares their healing
Yeah.
modalities and their cultural beliefs, not out of the way so that you can take them on for yourself or copy them, more so that you are encouraged to find out yours.
It's an awareness.
It's an
Yeah.
awareness, and it's
Yeah.
really, really beautiful.
Oh, like
Um,
that.
so yeah, I wanted to give her a shout out because she literally spoke about that. I only read one chapter so far, but she talked about that. So maybe we can talk about a little bit like how the witch wound might show up in our lives, because you have to think, like, some people
Today.
might say, well, if this is a collective thing, does this mean like that we were all witches in the past? Not necessarily. You have to like think, if you were witnessing this happening in society or in your community and you just knew this was happening, there would be such a feeling of fear, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
like I definitely cannot be myself, I definitely cannot do, even if it
Yeah.
wasn't anything to do with anything witchy,
Anything
like even if
witchy.
it was just like, oh, I want to do this and this is what society tells me I should do,
Yeah.
definitely would not be, you'd be afraid to do so. And
It's
that,
like following against the
yes,
norm, right?
yes,
Anytime you go against what society has told us we should do, or this is what is to be, whatever, I don't know, quote unquote,
mm,
expected, anytime you go against the system, right, there's automatically this pushback that you're going to get,
yeah, yeah.
right? And it goes into many different areas.
Yeah. And, some people are well-meaning. Like I'm thinking about, adult children that want to do something different than their family or their parents did it. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily that their parents are, operating from a bad place. It's just what they know. And this is so ingrained in us. It's so
Yeah.
ingrained in us.
It's hard to let go of that, right? I was always
Yes.
the biggest lesson that I learned when I did social service work, when I went to school for it, was you have to be willing to have one, self-awareness, going within, but also to be able to unlearn.
Yeah.
And that was huge for me. What was previously taught,
Yeah.
right? And then learning new things. And so I've always just carried that with me, having that self-awareness
We're
and
always evolving,
unlearning
and
and
life is
learning.
always evolving. And like,
Absolutely.
even like what is, you got to think about like the things that are happening now at that point in history would have been totally like witchcraft, like, planes flying in the air and being able to chat like this via video and reach people all over the world. That would have been like,
Oh yeah.
what, like what's happening? And information and intelligence is constantly evolving. So I feel like a lot of this has to do with acceptance, awareness, and then acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
That, when you know better, you do better. And that's something that I've been,
Yeah,
with my own intergenerational
that's
trauma
huge.
has been, like I've been able to send a lot of love and forgiveness to, maybe people in the past in my life and also within my family line,
Mm.
because I have this real like awareness now that when you know better, you do better. And we're all just trying to do that. Like we're all trying to do
To
our
do
best,
better.
and we do our
Yeah.
best with what we have for the most part.
Yeah.
Right. So it can
Yeah.
be really healing just to even have an awareness of it and to kind of accept it for what it is. It doesn't mean we
Yeah.
have to love it, right? It doesn't mean we have to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But we can really free ourselves from the shackles of it. It's interesting because I did a morning minute message this morning. And the card I pulled was the reversed hanged man. And it was literally about like, oh,
Yeah.
we're kind of free from the shackles. We can
Unstuck.
see, yeah, we're feeling a bit
Yeah.
unstuck. So that really taps into what we're talking about today. So going back to that same article, I don't know if you want to read through it. I do, but like, what does this really look like though, is what it's saying. Like, how is it showing up in terms of maybe healing? Having an awareness and acceptance. So it says awareness and acceptance would be the first steps, and then action phase, right? Which is very similar when we talk about manifestation. It's very similar, those 3 A's: awareness, exception, and action. Acceptance and action. So it says, what does this really look like though, to be aware?
She says that recognizing that it's a choice now to live in constant fear and adhere to survival coping mechanisms.
Yes.
Recognizing that we can, I feel like this is no longer turn a blind eye to the trauma, pain, wounding, and oppression that has been happening for centuries and is continuing to happen. I think that's really important to acknowledge. This, like, racism, sexism, all of this othering, these factors, it hasn't gone away.
And just thinking about, like, in the last few years, how all of these things have really exploded. Like it's no longer hiding in the shadows. Like it's really bubbling up, and we're seeing it all the time. I'm thinking about like George Floyd.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
right. Like all of these different things, even like with the, what was it called? Nasty Women. I'm thinking about in DC, when all the women had their little cat hats on, and they were like, I'm a nasty woman, like fighting back about oppression of females and sharing our voice and our power. And that as well, like all of that is kind of uprising right now. And I think it's just because we're no longer wanting to turn a blind eye to it. It's no longer something that we can, because it's I think we're becoming more aware that it is not us versus them. It never has been, because we are all connected. So when we other a certain group of people or a person for being different than us, we're really also creating trauma and pain within ourselves. Like we're doing that to ourselves.
We're continuing that trauma. We're adding to the problem. And I think so much about that, it's not about how different we are. And I think it's about embracing our uniqueness as individuals and loving and accepting that for who we are. She also goes on to say, choosing to do the internal work around these wounds and being brave enough to talk about them. That's huge. I mean, even talking about this for me feels scary.
Yeah.
Right?
It's bubbling something up inside.
It's bubbling something up.
Yeah.
Where was I? Yes, grounding ourselves individually as we awaken to the pain and oppression of others. Rewriting the narrative. That feels really huge. That really
rewriting the narrative.
Rewriting the narrative that we were born into and that keeps us trapped into the old stories. Reclaiming ourselves, our pasts, our lineages, our pain, trauma, and our place in it.
Like taking responsibility as well, that that we sometimes it can be triggering, right, to do this kind of work, because we're looking at ourselves, we're looking at our parents, we're looking at society at large, we're looking at people that maybe we admired in the past, and we're kind of seeing how we ourselves have perpetuated this cycle or have been trapped in this cycle without realizing it, and maybe we have done harm. And it can be really triggering. And so, I can think about myself even 5 years ago, that it would have made me feel quite defensive, like I needed to defend myself.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think I personally feel I've done a lot of learning, and that I am continuing to do that learning. A lot of that learning, shout out to my therapist. Love her, and has helped me really see different patterns in my life, but also patterns like just with intergenerationally, how it might have affected me. And it's really just helping me have an awareness. So can't recommend therapy enough, folks. Can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, no, like, because when we're trapped in those cycles and, maybe we're not even aware of it. I do a lot of work around cycle breaking. So this is reminding me of cycle breaking. I am somebody that absolutely would resonate as being, called a cycle breaker. 100%. And that's just like really like having an awareness of what this pattern or cycle is. Like that's the biggest thing. That's half the battle, is being aware, because you have to think maybe the people that have come before you, like where this is coming from, did not have the awareness. They were stuck in that loop, and it's, for me, sometimes I feel like it manifests in like a victim mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Very much so. And that's where the defensiveness comes from.
This makes me think of, sorry to interrupt
you, please go
Amy.
ahead.
It just makes me think of this. I love this book. So I don't know if you've read it or other folks have the Push.
Yes, I have read it. Yes.
That, like, even just reading about the witch wound, I was like, oh my gosh, this really reminds me of that book, which talks about mother, the mother wound, the daughter wound, the sister wound.
Yeah.
And she's a Canadian author, so shout out to Ashley Audring for the Push. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it.
Yeah. So that is not based on real events. It's fiction. It's fiction, right? But it kind of weaves a story where that you definitely can see that playing out within her. In her lifetime. Yeah. I think we could probably come up with quite a few instances in our own lives, where we've read or seen on TV, which would show this playing out. So I wanted to share a quick story before we do our card pull today. So this really came about, interestingly enough. So I got a new oracle deck, and I know you're like, guys, do you really need another one? I'm trying to be more choosy.
The answer is yes.
Always need a new one. But I'm trying to be more choosy with the decks that I buy, and so sometimes things just jump out at me, and I got a jolt over this one.
Ooh, we love a jolt. Okay,
it's called Angels Among Us, and so the archangels are in here as well as the ascended masters, but they are, they're illustrated in a very relatable way.
Yes, I love those cards.
Have you seen this before?
Yeah, you showed. Well, you shared them with me, I think, over Instagram. But I love them.
You need this.
I need them. You
need them. So I did a card spread the day that I got this deck, and it's called the Expanded Chakra Spread. So it is in the guidebook, and so you're pulling a card for each of your chakras, and for the solar plexus chakra, the question was, how can I stand in my power and shine my light? And the card I got was this beautiful, for those of you on YouTube, you'll be able to see it, Baba Yaga.
Baba Yaga, yes. Okay.
So she is a witchy woman. So the card, it says the wise and wild woman, the witch, and duality, it says on the card. And so let me just read this. So this is really about, reclaiming your power. And the question was, how can I reclaim my power? How can I stand in my power? And so some of the things came in saying like let me see. The spirituality message for this would be understanding and connecting with your shadow side can be deeply healing. Bringing your shadow side into light will help you find more peace and freedom. Your shadow is not bad. It just is, right? There's that duality or the otherness message. There's a lot more to this that I won't read, but it just says, embody the energy of Baba Yaga by not giving a hoot what others say about you and how you live your life. Owning your light and your dark. Owning your power. Embracing and loving your shadow, but still loving your light. Giving yourself permission to go off the grid and reconnect with the wildness of nature, embracing and being grateful for the aging process. So I really loved that. And I definitely have been working with that energy for, I'd say, the last 5 years. And this kind of reminded me of a quick story that I will share, and was the inspiration. This card was really the inspiration for today's topic. Yeah. So, I've shared before that my great grandmother was a medium and a tea leaf reader. So this is what she did, you know, in the home, kind of like come through the side door at night. And my grandmother has shared with me. So my grandmother lived with her
Yeah.
grandmother for, I think, the first couple years of her life. And my grandmother would share that she would come down the stairs when she was supposed to be in bed and sit on the stairs just
And
on the
listen.
other side and listen. And so I've been doing a lot of ancestry, digging around and putting together my family tree. And this lady's name was Mary Frost. It's okay if I share that, I'm sure, because she, you know, that she's been long gone. She's been gone for a long time.
Shout out Mary.
Shout out to Mary Frost. So she, she has
Sorry.
come to me in spirit over the years. Okay.
Mm.
And I was talking to somebody the other day who was kind of practicing their own intuitive skills. And she wanted to practice tapping into my energy, which she did. And she brought through Mary. And yeah, and really talked about how I am she didn't say I'm healing the witch wound, but I am healing. I am healing a lot of this, silencing our voices or not standing in the power of being intuitive women, because this line of women, I have always known that my grandmother is a witchy woman. This is the lady who would predict all of her grandchildren's births by the moon cycle. So this lady and loves astrology and like is so into all of this stuff, but just never really nurtured or stepped into it. It's just kind of been like little quirks about man, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And now she's 94, amazing lady.
Oh my gosh.
And, we're talking about these things sometimes and she's like, I think it's our ESP. And I'm like, it's more than that, Nan. But I'm like helping her really work with it a little bit, which is amazing thing to do.
That's beautiful that you're able to do that too, Amy.
I love it. And we've talked about it a lot, how it's more than that. It's more than that. And we need to nurture it. So anyways, what came through for Mary the other day was that, I'm the fourth generation since Mary. I'm the first one, though, that has not only had an awareness of my abilities and skills and gifts, but accepted them as such and nurtured them and also celebrates them. And so I'm the first person since Mary to do so. And maybe even more so because she was never really able to celebrate because she wasn't able to be out and about.
Yeah.
And really public with it. And I am. So she was very much like, you are healing this line. You are rewriting the story so that your children and their children and their children will no longer not know what this is or be scared of it. They will be able to work with it because it's already so innate in them, as I feel like it is with all of us. And I feel like the children being born in this millennium are like off the charts psychic. I absolutely feel that. I feel like there's a reason for it. And I feel like the more we talk about this, the more we make it mainstream, the easier it will be for them to just accept. Because you got to think, like, I think my oldest two kids are Gen Zs. And my youngest, we were just looking this up the other day. My youngest is Alpha. So after 2010, Alpha.
Yeah.
And we were talking about like how Gen Z, like they are just different. They're more accepting. Like they are into this stuff. It's just kind of normal for them in a way. I just wanted to really give a shout out to Mary and to thank her for coming through to me in that way. And I wanted to dedicate this episode to her and honor her for, makes me want to cry.
I'm getting like goosebumps.
I know, but I just, you have to think about having this ability and just being afraid to do it. And think about this time period. We're talking about the late 1920s, early 1930s, doing it anyways.
Yeah.
How brave and courageous she would have been doing it anyways.
I think everybody doing this work is, and because there's so much, I think there still is a lot of, we've talked about this very openly before, a lot of preconceived notions or a lot of things that you would, this is not the norm, let's say, quote unquote, right? And I think we are kind of pushing it to the forefront. A lot of people doing this work. Um, it's really encouraging to see that there is more openness as we step further and further and progress. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of us, we're bringing this topic to the forefront for discussion and, of contemplation, but really a lot of us and the generations, that are kind of coming up right now are doing this work without maybe consciously being aware that I'm doing it. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Oh,
I'm going to be true to
absolutely.
myself and making my own
Yeah.
decisions. Like we're doing the work culturally,
Yes.
the younger generation anyways. So if you think about being more intentional, how much more powerful. And I feel like I get goosebumps. It's almost like speeding up the process. So if it's happening anyways, if we intentionally do it,
Yeah.
think about how amazing that would be. Like we could have this wound healed, like globally in no time.
In no time. Yeah.
That's the power of the collective and the power of the mind. So I don't know. Are you ready to pull a card for
Let's
today?
pull a card.
Okay.
And for Mary.
Yes, for Mary. And speaking of Mary, so
and
Mary
all
was a
us wise
teenager.
women.
All the wise, wild women, all the witches. It's okay to say you're a witch. Honestly, I honestly have always felt, I've always been really drawn to witches. I think you said that you were too, Erin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My mom
like,
couldn't get me out of my witch costume when I was a kid.
yeah. It's like a recognition or a remembering. We think about, I had somebody recently said, like, why would you want to identify as a witch? And I'm like, not that I do very often, but I wouldn't be offended if somebody said I was witchy. And I said, well, what you see on TV or read in fairy tales is not what a witch was like. Like that was not, maybe witches did have to go in hiding. Maybe they did get really isolated and untrusting, right? All the things we talked about. So maybe, like the witch became a bit hardened. So maybe there's some truth in some of those fairy tales, but I
love it. I also just think witches just represent the untamed woman, right? The woman that speaks her mind, her truth, not afraid to show her colors, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the symbology as well.
And I think, when we talk about like mythology or folklore and things like that, and the
there's so much symbolism and
it's kind of like that's what happens when the witch is silenced, when the witch is cast stones, when the witch is isolated. Maybe, but that is also representing society and what happens when we are othered, when we are, judged and stereotyped. We get hardened.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of Mary was a tea leaf reader. So I have this tea leaf deck that I got for my birthday, I think last year, and I rarely use it. I should use it more often. I rarely use it. So I wanted to pull a card from this to honor Mary, the tea leaf reader from North Bay, Ontario. And, but funny enough, she was born and raised in Quebec. And that came up also as a similarity between us because she moved to another place, but had a very strong connection to her place of birth, which I resonate with, and like the feeling of having to start over and reinvent yourself. And that's something that came up for Mary too, Mary and I. So is it okay if I start first? Because I pulled the card already. I've got the whale.
Ooh, oh.
So it says, great worry over nothing. This also really taps into, the card I said I pulled earlier, the hangman, the reverse hangman. A whale surfaces from the ocean, scaring the queerest. I guess it means like the person looking. Queeriest? I don't know how to say that. Yeah. With its size and fierce looks. The whale, however, pays no attention and swims calmly away. This card shows that you will be faced with certain situations that will cause you a great deal of anxiety. As time passes, however, the situations will disappear and you will realize that the anxious times were over conjectured fears. So super interesting, because yesterday also I pulled for the collective the Eight of Wands, and that was all about
Oh, yeah.
your, kind of project, like your mindset is telling you this, but the reality is different.
Mm-hmm.
So that card is really, like tapping into that. And that's also the other, like, it's was kind of was talking about the person seeing this was like, oh, a big scary whale. Like that's, and this, the whale couldn't be bothered with it. It's like, I'm just going to do my own
Yeah.
thing. Right.
Yes.
So it's like making a mountain out of a
I don't
molehill.
know. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's an interesting card. So that's for this current week. Maybe spend some time contemplating that message from the whale.
I love that. That's beautiful. And it ties in really, really well, I think, to this card that I pulled from the spellcasting oracle deck, which I thought was appropriate. I really love this deck. And it is Lighten Your Load.
Oh,
Right? I'm just reading from the guidebook here. So it says you have the choice and power to remove yourself from a stressful situation or simply take it in stride. Stress is completely voluntary and something we allow ourselves to feel. Even if this may not seem to be the case as you face the responsibility that your life demands, give your exhausted and tortured mind a break as you start to see things with a brighter outlook. Lighten your load and allow laughter, oh, that's a good one, to break you free from your self-imposed prison cell. It's the
oh,
only way to strengthen your immune system and inspire hope while protecting you from the damaging effects that stress has dealt you.
how
Yeah.
much does that
Wow.
fit into the whale message, the things we're talking about
Things
today?
are healing, letting go of all this. Like all I see here is all that, not only stress, those wounds, maybe that intergenerational things that we are all, in some form probably healing from,
Yeah.
trying to heal from at least, right? Um, Lighten your load, and we're trying to let that go and not carry so much. Um, maybe we're feeling guilt in some way, right? This could represent a lot of things for different people. Try to letting that go. And I like that they included, find moments of joy, laugh. I think laughter is huge.
Yeah, laughter is very healing.
Yeah.
And maybe just to end, I kind of brought up cycle breaking earlier, which is very
Mm-hmm.
similar to what we're talking about today. Please know that when you do this work, when you're called to do this work, not only are you, healing yourself and your current
Mm-hmm.
lifetime, you're healing your ancestors,
Yeah.
like they are absolutely rooting on you. You are the dream, you are a dream of your ancestors, like you are what they dreamed of.
Yeah.
And so you do that for them, and you break, the chain moving forward. The future generations will not have to deal with this current thing, because trauma is inherited through our DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also
Mm-hmm.
immersed in it collectively, or like within our
Yeah.
family.
We can carry it in our bodies.
We carry it in our body. So even if you don't necessarily resonate with maybe having trauma in your life, although I do feel like everybody does,
In some form,
some ways,
there's
like
something
I know that we all
perhaps.
love Gabby Bernstein.
Yeah.
Her newest book is called Happy Days, and
Mm,
she talks in it about like big T trauma and little T trauma. And so big T trauma is the things we think about trauma, like somebody died, somebody got a divorce, big T trauma.
yeah.
But that doesn't take away from other trauma. Like it could be traumatic to get fired. It could be
Hmm.
it's very traumatic to get bullied, like things like that we all experience, or even being othered in
Pushed.
some way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's traumatic, that's trauma.
Yeah.
So we do collectively experience trauma. So I
Hmm.
just wanted to put that out there though as well, because I've had people go, "But I had a great childhood, like I don't think I had any trauma, but like why is this resurfacing in me? Why do I need to break this cycle?"
Why are these patterns coming up? And so often we find that, if the patterns are coming up, it's simply to learn that, to
Yes.
break that pattern or to end that pattern for yourself so you can move forward as well. And the other thing I like too about that, Amy, is maybe you agree with it, is that um, even if you're not ready at that moment or there's stuff going on for you, You don't have to do that now. You can do that later. It's not like, it's going to go away forever, right? And
Yeah.
oh no, I missed the lesson. Oh, great.
No, this is a
You can
lifetime
always
thing.
come back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lifetime thing. So you don't have to ever worry about that. And it's never too late to do it. And remember that awareness is half the battle. Just simply
Yes.
being aware of it is
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know who this is. Decline.
Oh, somebody's calling. Okay.
Somebody's calling me.
I didn't hear anything, so it's okay.
Oh, you're all welcome, podcast world.
Awareness is half the battle, because awareness
Yeah.
is a gift, because you got to think about it. When you have the awareness, at least then you're presented an option. Whereas when you're blinded to it, you don't have the option because you don't know it's there. So just think about that as well. And that itself is doing the work without maybe like, really
huge.
getting into it. It's
just being present. Yeah. Yes.
Just being aware. Okay, guys. Have a wonderful week. See you next week.
Bye.
If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast and tune in each week as we dish on all things spiritual.
Don't forget to like, comment on what you would like to hear us talk about next, and subscribe.